Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Decision Day Fulton National Virtual Rally. My name is Brian Silva. I'm the founder and executive director of NEAT, the National Quality Action Team, and very excited to have led a fantastic group of organizations to pull together this evening's events for you. What I'm going to do right now is pull up a slide so folks who would like to listen to live Spanish translation can use that number to call in. And we'll leave that up for a minute while I talk some more, just to make sure folks have a chance to write it down. Let's go ahead and put that slide back up and leave it up there for just a little bit so folks can write it down. All right, great. I want to thank our ASL interpreters, Gloshanda and Johnny, who are here. A little bit about Decision Day. Decision Day is an organizing event that's been going on now for quite a few years around major court cases affecting LGBTQ people, and today is no different. We have almost 100 organizations that are co-sponsoring this event, and right now I'd like to thank them all and introduce them and show them to you all on the screen. Our organizing team met weekly to pull this together and put together the events you're going to see right now and later this evening. And our co-sponsors have been helping to publicize it and recruit folks to attend and make sure that you all knew about it and knew you had a place to go. Those are all of our co-sponsors who helped to organize the events that you are going to see tonight. So thank you again. All right, just as a reminder, you can go to decisionday.org/town hall to join the town hall tonight. And we hope that you will and join our panel that's going to dig a little bit deeper into what happened during today's decision. At this point, though, I would like to introduce our co-host for the evening. First is Stacy Stevenson, the CEO of Family Equality. She's a speaker, writer, and LGBTQ advocate. And before joining Family Equality, she held senior roles in defense, technology, and finance. Stacy and her wife, Sherilyn, live in Dallas with their 6-year-old twin boys, Duke and London. Second, Chris Melody Fields Figueredo is the executive director of the Ballot Initiative Strategy Center, or BISC. She has 2 decades of experience in advocacy, collaboration, and movement building. And she's a Venezuelan American and a former foster parent and lives in DC, Washington, DC with her daughter, Olivia. Stacy and Chris, thank you both so much for being here. I'll turn it over to you.
Hey, Brian, thank you for having us. And as Brian said, my name is Stacy Stevenson, CEO of Family Equality, and I want to welcome everyone here today to our Decision Day rally. So the Supreme Court finally issued its long-awaited opinion in Fulton versus City of Philadelphia. Now, if this is the first time you're hearing about it, just a little bit of history. Catholic Social Services, which is a government-contracted foster care agency in Philadelphia, claimed a constitutional right to exclude families based on its religious belief. Now, specifically, it was unwilling to license same-sex couples as foster care parents. Now, while we were all hoping for a decision in favor of the City of Philadelphia, today's loss was very narrow and case-specific. And honestly, you know, in all things considered, to me, today's opinion feels like a victory for the LGBTQ plus community, a victory for LGBTQ plus parents, and for kids in foster care. Now, there is a critical item to note here about the case. The court rejected Catholic Social Services' request to create a broad new constitutional right, or as we call it, a license to discriminate in child welfare and beyond. But I don't want to forget, though, that there is an immediate impact of today's decision. So today's decision will undoubtedly be felt by the children in Philadelphia's foster care system and the same-sex couples who wish to become foster and adoptive parents. So tonight, I want us to think about them, hold them in our hearts, and lift them up as we go through this decision and what it means. The other thing I want to do is I want to share a message from Philly Family Pride. And Philly Family Pride is actually a member of our national network here at Family Equality, and they're also an organization with a standing in this case. And today they asked us to send a message to Philadelphia foster youth, particularly those who are LGBTQ+. And that message is that you are loved, and that we will continue the effort to ensure all of you find loving, affirming homes And to the LGBTQ plus adults, you are just as qualified as anyone else to be foster parents. So this is why now more than ever, everyone, we must raise our voices. We must raise our voices to pass the John Lewis Every Child Deserves a Family Act. And this bill is going to prohibit discrimination in child welfare based on sexual orientation, gender identity, marital status, and religion. And we must pass the Equality Act, which is a comprehensive non-discrimination bill that would add sexual orientation, gender identity to existing civil rights laws. So now I'm going to turn it over to my co-host and fellow Texan, Chris.
Thank you, Stacy, and I look forward to the day that we can meet each other in person. When Stacy and I met virtually, we bonded over being Texans, and when you're from Texas, like you live that pride, you hold that pride, and sometimes, depending on what the politics in the states, you might run away from it. Which is why I'm in Washington D.C. on the traditional lands and Nakatouch people. So my name is Chris Melody Fields Figueredo. My pronouns are she, her, ella, and I'm so honored to be your fellow co-MC, Stacy, and really speak from the perspective of a queer person of faith, as a woman of color who, a mother of my former foster daughter, my daughter, right, Olivia, who I adopted now almost 3 years ago. So today was a deeply personal day for me, and it really reminded me and brought up a lot of feelings. And I think what you said, Stacy, is like remembering that today is a victory. We have to celebrate those moments of victory because that helps us move forward. And we know we still have so much more work to do by the passage of the Equality Act and ensuring that LGBTQ plus parents and families have the protections and have the opportunity to build safe and loving homes with youth who really seek that. I know that was so incredibly important for my daughter, of finding a place where she felt safe and loved. And every child, every person deserves that. So I'm really excited to dig into and learn from experts who worked on this case. And I have the honor of introducing our first two speakers who are going to go a little bit more into the details of the case and break it down for us so we understand exactly the impact and what it means moving forward. So please join me in welcoming James Essex. He's the director of the director of the ACLU LGBTQ and HIV project. James and his team were of counsel in the Fulton versus Philadelphia case, and we're also joined by Stephanie Haynes, who's the executive director at Philadelphia Family Pride, who Stacy mentioned earlier, and one of the plaintiffs in the case. So excited to learn from you, James and Stephanie.
Thank you so much. And hi, everybody. It's great to be here with you all this evening. I'm James, use he, him pronouns. And the question before the court in the Fulton case was whether a city can enforce its LGBT non-discrimination law, or whether the Constitution gives religious organizations a right to discriminate if they have a religious reason for the discrimination. And as has been discussed, it involved a religiously affiliated foster care agency, Catholic Social Services, that refused to certify same-sex couples as foster parents because of its religious objections, in violation of Philadelphia's non-discrimination requirement. And in the decision that came out today, the court did three things. First, it said it didn't give the plaintiffs the constitutional license to discriminate that they were seeking. And that is got to be the headline of the decision and a super important point. Second, the court made clear that non-discrimination laws are important and can be enforced so long as they are enforced even-handedly. And third, it held that the religious foster care agency here, Catholic Social Services, technically won its case, but only because Philadelphia's non-discrimination rule had a quirk in it. That rule in the contract basically said, well, you folks, nobody can discriminate unless we say it's okay. And the Supreme Court said, hold on a second, that's not an even-handed rule, and that violates the Constitution. But it's clear from the decision that basically all other non-discrimination laws in the country are generally applicable and don't have that quirk. All of those can still be enforced. So big picture, while this wasn't a win for the city of Philadelphia or for Philly Family Pride, one of the interveners here, it is good news for LGBTQ people and for all civil rights laws. And that's because opponents of LGBTQ equality have been advocating for religious exemptions from non-discrimination laws for years. They've been asking the courts again and again to rule that the Constitution gives them a right to discriminate. And today is the second time in 3 years that the United States Supreme Court has refused to give them that ruling, instead deciding cases on super narrow, super case-specific grounds. And so that's good news, which basically means we live to fight another day. But folks, we are not out of the woods on this issue. Opponents of LGBTQ equality have more cases in the pipeline, and they are still pushing for other courts to rule that the Constitution lets them discriminate. And we collectively need to continue making clear that we agree that religious freedom is important, because it is. And that's why religious freedom is protected by the First Amendment to the Constitution. But religious freedom doesn't give anyone the right to discriminate or to harm other people. Now, let me pass it to Stephanie Haynes, the executive director of Philadelphia Family Pride, which has been one of the ACLU's clients in the case and one of the organizations that intervened in the case to help the city defend its law. Stephanie.
Great. Thank you, James. Like you said, Stephanie Haynes, I use she, her pronouns, and I am the director of Philly Family Pride, or PFP. I live in West Philadelphia with my wife and our 14-year-old twins. A little bit about our group. PFP is a group that serves LGBTQ parents, prospective parents, grandparents, and our kids of all ages. Our mission includes holding social events for LGBTQ-led families, but we also do educational events around various paths to parenthood for LGBTQ adults. So as part of our education efforts for many years now, we have been holding these information sessions for prospective foster parents in Philadelphia in conjunction with the city and some of the local foster agencies. We joined this case as an intervener, as James said, along with the Support Center for Child Care Advocates right at the very beginning over 3 years ago. And we're very grateful for ACLU's tireless advocacy on behalf of our families, and just like to specifically shout out Leslie Cooper for the great work that she's done on this case. It's been a kind of a roller coaster day, right? I'm sure other people feel that too. We're relieved that this decision only really applies to this specific contract, and we're hopeful that the city of Philadelphia will be able to address the constitutional concerns that the court identified. But really for us, this case is first and foremost about kids. I'd like to really directly address any Philadelphia LGBTQ youth who may be listening or watching this. Please know that you are loved. We will continue to work to make sure that there are loving, affirming homes for you. We are behind you, and the city is behind you. And for any LGBTQ adults listening who are considering becoming foster parents, I know that people consider it for a long time, of course, before they jump in. But I really want to make sure people are not discouraged by this ruling. You are just as qualified to become foster parents as anyone else, and you are needed. There is no reason that families should be turned away. Our families should be turned away from fostering children. And we at Philly Family Pride will continue to make sure that your family is respected and affirmed in the child welfare system in Philadelphia, as you seek to provide this kind of support for children in foster care. So these kids cannot afford to lose out on the love that your family has to offer. So thanks again for having me tonight. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Great. Thank you so much, James and Stephanie, for grounding us in the case and what it means and the work ahead, and also the impact on the children and LGBTQ plus adults in Philadelphia as well. So now I have the pleasure of introducing our next guests, and our next guests are foster youth and parents. And so our first guest is Ernesto Olivares. And Ernesto Olivares is a longtime foster care advocate who spent 6 years in the Texas foster care system. And then we have Marianne Deddy Burke, who is the executive director of Dignity USA, who has provided foster care for 19 years despite being denied a license by the Catholic Charities of Boston. And then we also have Representative Angie Craig, the first lesbian mom in Congress who faced discrimination when she adopted her first son. She led the congressional amicus brief in Fulton and is an original co-sponsor of the John Lewis Every Child Deserves a Family Act. And then we have Natalie Clark. And Natalie is an advocate for foster youth and spent 6 years in the Utah foster care system. She also shared her experience in an amicus brief submitted to the Supreme Court in this case. And so now I'll turn it over to Ernesto.
Thank you so much for having me. My name is Ernesto Olivares. I am a former foster youth here in the state of Texas. I first want to acknowledge Philadelphia's foster youth. We are here and we affirm you, and we will continue to fight for you. My heart is going out to everybody out there, foster parents, adoptive parents. Thank you so much for everything that you do out there. I identify as a gay man. As a former foster kid, we don't get to choose our agencies. I feel that is why every agency has to be LGBTQ and two-spirit affirming, so that foster kids don't have to go through what I went through. In the time I was in care, I was only placed in one foster home. My home was very Christian-oriented. Church wasn't an option. As a closeted teen, this was very difficult for me to express who I really was. During my time in a foster group home, my parents and other kids used offensive terms such as faggot and gay to make me and others feel bad. I wish I could comfortably and confidently lived and spoke about how I felt inside without doubt of being accepted. There aren't protections for foster youth everywhere. That's why the John Lewis Every Child Deserves a Family Act and Equality Act need to be passed on the federal level. Thank you so much for having me, and I'd like to next introduce Natalie Clark.
Thank you. I would like to share my personal experience being LGBTQ in Utah's foster care system. During one of my first visits with a potential foster home, I experienced an incident that impacted my ability to share my identity for the following 4 years of foster care to come. While I was at the group home, I was told I would get to go on an overnight visit to meet the family that would potentially be my foster family, and I was ecstatic to have a foster family take me in. I thought the visit was going really well. Dinner and conversation seemed to be going great, and it was approaching time for dessert when I was asked the question whether I had a boyfriend. Without giving much thought, I replied that I had a crush on a girl, and I was then met with dead silence throughout the room. This caused me to feel conflicted and unsafe in sharing my identity, because dessert ended up being skipped, and the family told me it was time to end the visit and pack my bags to go back to the group home. I was absolutely devastated as I obsessed over trying to figure out what I said and did wrong and why I wasn't wanted by the family. This caused me to feel conflicted and unsafe in sharing my identity because it could cost me the opportunity at the one and only thing I had ever wished for, a family. I then never felt comfortable sharing part of who I am with those around me in fear of being turned away again until I became an adult and was out of foster care. As a former foster youth, I have experienced the feeling of being discriminated against for who I am and something I have no control over. This ruling is a narrow loss, and I want to clarify and be clear to my peers that this does not create a broad new license to discriminate. We still need protections like the Equality Act and the John Lewis Every Child Deserves a Family Act. And this decision is a reminder that child welfare agencies have a responsibility to provide homes that youth can thrive, and pointed out the need for contracts to be readdressed and equality acts to be pursued. Young people don't get to choose which agency serves them, which is why I shared my story in Foster Club's amicus brief alongside 13 other young people. I want foster youth across the country, and especially within Philadelphia, to know that we are here for you, we love you, and we will never give up fighting for you. We all deserve to be loved and have a family, and I would like to tell LGBTQ two-spirit plus families that we see you, we need you, and we will also continue to fight to have you in our lives no matter what. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Marianne Duddyberg, and 19 years ago, my spouse Becky and I tried to register with Catholic Charities Boston to start the process of becoming foster parents. For weeks, we left multiple messages and never got a call back. Finally, a social worker called us on her personal phone on personal time to let us know that we were being ignored because we were a lesbian couple. To be discriminated against simply because of who we were was very painful, especially when we had thought long and hard about how to expand our family and knew that fostering to adopt was the right choice for us. We eventually did find another way into the system and adopted 2 special needs children who are now in their late teens. We've also provided emergency and kinship foster care over the years. Being parents is the most important role in our lives, but we shudder to think how close it came to never happening. Through our involvement with the foster care system, we've known many children who are waiting for the safety, stability, and love that being in a welcoming family would provide them. Based on all of this, I am relieved that the Supreme Court did not allow a broad license to discriminate for publicly funded faith-based agencies. That would have been disastrous for the over 400,000 children in state care across our country. And today's ruling says that governments can indeed have and enforce non-discrimination laws in the foster and adoption areas as in other areas. That's really important, given that same-sex couples are 7 times more likely than opposite-sex couples to be caring for foster and adopted children. And it would have been a humiliation, a burden, and an injustice to LGBTQ+ folks who want to open their hearts and homes to kids in foster care. Today's ruling shows just how important it is to end the possibility of discrimination in foster and adoptive care, and why it's so urgent that Congress pass the John Lewis Every Child Deserves a Family Act and get it to President Biden's desk very quickly. And now I'm honored to introduce Congresswoman Angie Craig of Minnesota.
Well, thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here with all of you this evening. I am Congresswoman Angie Craig, and I represent Minnesota's 2nd Congressional District. I'm also the first openly lesbian mother to ever serve in the U.S. House of Representatives. My wife Cheryl and I, we have 4 amazing sons who are 18 to 23 years old. I'm also extremely glad that the decision today did not include a sweeping ruling creating a broad license to discriminate against LGBTQ parents and children, because I believe that no parent should be denied the opportunity to build a family because of who they are or how they identify. You know, James said it right. We need a new law in this country, a new anti-discrimination law that would protect foster children and adoptive parents. That law is the John Lewis Every Child Deserves a Family Act. And I am so honored to be one of the original co-sponsors of my colleague's namesake bill that would make sure that all of us are protected. You know, this is an especially personal topic for me and my wife, Cheryl. My family has personally experienced LGBTQ discrimination in parenting that nearly prevented me from being able to adopt our oldest son, Josh, who's 23 now. You see, Josh was born on Christmas Day in Memphis, Tennessee. That morning, my partner and I got the call that we had anxiously been awaiting for, the call telling us that we were soon going to be parents. Josh was a beautiful baby. I know every parent says that, but honestly, he really was. I remember standing in front of the nursery, looking at him that day, and the moment, that was the moment, the very moment that I knew for sure that I wanted to be a mother and I wanted to be the parent of this baby. Of course, that was such a beautiful day for us. We were so joyful, but soon after, things took a heart-wrenching turn. We got a call later that evening with the worst news we could imagine, that the birth mother's parents were going to contest the adoption because we were LGBTQ. We didn't get to take our son home that day. We were there when he was born, but on that day we came back to get him from the hospital. We went home without him. So I want to tell you, as a member of Congress, as someone who is personally responsible for shepherding along the Every Child Deserves a Family Act, there is nothing more personal to me. No prospective parent should be forced to go through a similar experience in the years to come. No children like Josh should be prevented from entering a loving home with caring parents in a safe, warm bed. We were fortunate. It took 3 years for that case to work its way through the local and the appellate all the way up to the Tennessee Supreme Court. But we're also the namesake case, Josh's in fact, that established a lesbian's right to adopt in the state of Tennessee. And that case has been cited a number of times and helped countless families. Rest assured that today, tomorrow, for as long as it takes, I'll continue fighting every day with my colleagues in Congress to ensure that equal rights are protected for all Americans, regardless of their sexual orientation or gender identity. That fight has already begun in the 117th Congress with the House passage of the Equality Act and the introduction of the John Lewis Every Child Deserves a Family Act, which would effectively prohibit the discrimination in foster care that led to this very case. I'm proud to help carry on John Lewis's legacy by helping to lead that bill, and will fight with every fiber of my being as long as I'm a member of Congress to ensure that that law is passed and that it's signed into law by President Biden. So thank you again so much for having me today. Thank you for the plaintiffs and for everyone who has fought day in and day out. And I'm so honored to be leading that charge in the United States House of Representatives.
Oh, wow. That last panel just really spoke to my heart so much. And one of the who I thought of first when I heard today's decision were LGBTQ plus and Two-Spirit youth. So thank you so much to Ernesto and Natalie for sharing your stories from your perspectives, and Marianne and Angie too. These are the stories, these are the people, these are the real lives that we're fighting, and why the work continues, and why we are called to action, and why we do this work. And for those in the movement family, right, we know the importance of art in our work, and art is activism. So I'm so honored to introduce our next guest, Sam Hamashima. Sam is a writer and performance artist based in the unceded Lenape land known as New York City. Hamashima passionately wields theater and writing for empowerment, change, and intergenerational healing, something as a former, always a theater kid, deeply identifies with. So looking forward to listening to you.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? If I could get a thumbs up. Great. Thank you, Johnny. Yes, hello, theater kids, and hello, everyone. I was given the task of writing for this decision about a month ago. Now, just like all of you, I was not privy to the decision until today, and I had no knowledge of the outcome. So just like you, I am hearing the decision for the first time. My name is Sam Hamashima. I am currently on Wabanaki land, also known as Maine. I am 5'7", genderqueer, Asian American. My pronouns are they, them, plus. I'm wearing a baseball cap, a light blue sweater. Behind me is the Atlantic Ocean and the incoming dusk. On this day, I ask you to consider the oceans of our planet. I will think of the swells, and the bubbling foam of the tide coming in to touch my feet. The sun, the sand, the water, all emerging from a chaos indescribable to create a queer beauty. Somehow, it all works together. Yes, the ocean is queer, is it not? Strange, desirable, frequently undefinable. A seahorse identified by our society as male will give birth. A common slipper shell will change from male to female in their lifetime. Clownfish are intersex. Male, female, seahorse dad, seahorse mom. You can see how silly it is when we begin to gender shells. It's as if gender is actually just a construct and doesn't mean anything. Yes, the ocean is queer. 70% of our planet's surface is gay, 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 and you cannot tell me otherwise. The flamboyant jellyfish in the feathered boas, and the circuit party at the Great Barrier Reef, whales and their endless karaoke sessions to music we cannot hear, and the octopus, I mean, must I say more than tentacles? The fluidity, the chaos, the utter beauty of not understanding everything, but knowing that whatever lies in the water is beautiful. Only 5% of our oceans have been explored, leaving room for discovery and surprises. Yet I do not see people calling for a stop to discovery there. There is no call to save the children from our queer seahorses. There are people in this world who will not understand us. I know this. You know this. We all know this. Landlocked, they stay away from the ocean. What a sad life to never see the ocean, to not even consider the fluidity. But we have seen the ocean. We have stepped into waters and felt polyamory of sand, sun, and water, 3 concurrent kisses reminding us of nature's superiority to the laws of man. The dinosaurs are struggling. That is why we are seeing what we are seeing. Their rules they push forward are in hopes that a new world will be dictated by fossils they leave behind. But we know this cannot be. Fossils do not stay intact. If anything, they are locked away in museums. Fossils are fossils because they are not of this time. Now, please close your eyes with me and take a deep breath. Inhale, exhale, and I want you to keep your eyes closed. You are on a beach surrounded by us. You can hear it in the voices. Every one of us who sought the ocean is right here. Men in bikinis and women in Speedos, people putting sunscreen on each other's back tenderly. You are safe. You are here. Now open up your eyes. This is the world now. It is 1 in 6 now. 1 in 6. 1 is queer for every 6. And I'm sure of the 5 left, some are curious to see the ocean. We must move forward. No matter what, we must move forward. Look at your screen. Look at this trove. Treasures untold. How many wonders can one Zoom room hold? Looking around here, you think, sure, we've got everything. But we all want to be accepted, right? Even to the strangers, even to the dinosaurs. And I'd like to hold space for that. Because I want to be where the people are too. We have got everything we will ever need in our community. Because we take care of our own. That's a promise, yes? We are the queer ocean. Thank you.
Tres, uno, dos. 626-6799.
Wow, Sam, I'm speechless. I had goosebumps. That was absolutely beautiful. Thank you for that powerful and beautiful piece. So next, I have the pleasure of introducing our foster organization advocates. First, Christina Wilson-Remlin. Christina Wilson-Remlin is a lead counsel at Children's Rights who represent foster kids for 10 years. Next, we have Skylar Baber. Skylar Baber is with Voice for Adoption, and he also spent 11 years in foster care before aging out without a family. When he was 25, his mentor and sixth grade teacher adopted him. Next, we have Christine Thornton. Christine Thornton is an attorney and guardian at Lytton, represent foster and adoptive children in Colorado. And last, we have Sarah Kasalik. And Sarah is a citizen of the native village of Uzinki in Alaska. She's executive director of the National Indian Child Welfare Association. Now I'll turn it over to Christina.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us. I am tremendously honored to be speaking to you all in association with this wonderful little group of child welfare advocates and fierce fighters for LGBTQ equity in this space. I want to thank all the panelists and everyone who's gone before us for all that you've contributed. I think there's so much power in hearing from one another and dialing into the narratives that really form the framework of our passion for these issues. As child welfare and adoption advocates, we know how desperately foster care systems across the country need all safe and loving families to come forward to do this important work. There is no room for providers to use their religious beliefs to rule out loving families. The only litmus test should be love and safety. And so we are relieved that all this is a loss. It is a narrow one, not likely to have broad implications. And we celebrate the amazing work done by the City of Philadelphia and local advocates there to welcome LGBTQ families and serve LGBTQ youth. We will continue to zealot for equality in the child welfare and adoption systems, which is the only way to properly serve the best interests of children. Thank you so much.
Hello, my name is Skylar Baber. I'm the Executive Director of Voice for Adoption. As it was mentioned, I grew up in the Montana foster care system, going through tons of homes before I aged out without a family. I know firsthand what it feels like to feel isolated or to feel that someone's not standing up for you or that you're not getting the right thing done for you. Philadelphia, we see you and we affirm you, and we're standing here with you. It's vital. Working in child welfare, we know firsthand that there are families and children all over the country that have experienced some pretty hard times, that have experienced the level of rejection that you should never feel as an American. While Philadelphia is a small step backwards, it's not the end, and we have to fight. We have to live to fight another day. And that's why organizations like mine, Voice for Adoption, are going to continue the fight here in Washington, D.C. We're going to go to the Hill, do everything we can to represent all of us that are in and out of the foster care system, that are just seeking to be equal and not wanting to be told who to love or how to love, and most importantly, doing what's in the best interest of all children. And then that best interest is usually getting them in a family. All children deserve to have a family, and that's why we support the John Lewis Every Child Deserves a Family Act. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Christine Thornton. My pronouns are she, her. And I am honored to be in this rally, in this group of advocates. And all I wanted to add was to make sure that everyone knows I'm in Denver, Colorado. I am a guardian ad litem representing the best interests of children in the foster care and adoption systems. And there are thousands of us out there who will continue to advocate and will continue to fight and will be your voice, will be the children's voice in the system for those families and for the children who need it in the LGBTQ plus community and throughout. So when you need those advocates, there are those of us there who are willing to continue to fight. And I think that this is not a tremendous step back. I think we have solidified rights and will continue to move those forward. I encourage everyone to continue to support and talk to their senators about the Equality Act, as well as John Lewis Act. Thank you very much for allowing me to be here and support this amazing group.
Chimai, good evening. The National Indian Child Welfare Association is here to stand in solidarity with our partners and LGBTQ communities, families, and youth. We'll relentlessly advocate for all children to have safe and loving foster families when they need them, including LGBTQ families. We stand with you. Juliana.
Wow, just another excellent panel who just, providing us more stories and context to what we are grappling with today and in the decision in Fulton. I consider myself a person of faith, and that journey for me has been an embattled one. As queer folks, my community, I know many of us feel. And one of the things that James said earlier, we can all agree of the importance of religious freedom, and that is real, but that should not allow discrimination. And the piece that really spoke to me was, and not to do harm to others. And I think we all know the harm many systems have, especially systems of oppression, have inflicted on many of us, and that includes queer folks of faith as well. So I'm honored to welcome the next panel of folks from the faith community. First, we have Laura Peralta Schulte, who is the Chief Lobbyist at Network Lobby for Catholic Social Justice. Also, Rabbi Simone Scheiker is the Rabbi of Temple B'nai Israel in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and is a proud queer Jew. And finally, Reverend Naomi Washington Leapart, a Black queer church girl, preacher, teacher, and activist, as well as an adjunct professor of theology and religious studies at Villanova University. Welcome to all of you.
It is really an honor to be here with you tonight. My name is Laura Peralta. I'm with Network Lobby for Catholic Social Justice. And I just wanted to bring Catholic teaching is grounded in the belief that all people are created in the image and likeness of God, beloved by our Creator for who we are. And thus, everybody deserves dignity and respect. And we know that a majority of people in our country, including a majority of people of faith and my fellow Catholics, believe that the rights of the LGBTQ individuals and families must be protected from discrimination. Our mission for nearly 50 years has been guided by the gospel teachings, which tell us there is for us the need to emphasize our lobbying to help push and ally with those people who have been pushed to the margins by discriminatory systems and structures. So we are so pleased today to be with you here to discuss this decision. We know that this decision is very painful for our sisters and brothers in Philadelphia. And for that, we want to let you know just how loved you are by us and how much we are standing with you in prayer this moment. Network, like others though, is very relieved, frankly, that the court took such a narrow decision. So let us be clear, the court is not establishing in this case the right for religious organizations to discriminate. It leaves intact the broader principles that the government can and must require contractors, including religious agencies, to comply with non-discrimination laws. And for this, we are grateful. We are a lobby shop. We know there is much more work to be done. We know family is sacred. We know that denying LGBTQ friends, neighbors, families from being able to build loving families with children, particularly at-risk kids in foster care, is immoral. So we pledge to you today that we will stand and fight. We will fight with you side by side because discrimination should have no home in our communities. We call on Congress and are grateful for the leadership of members who are supporting the passage of the John Lewis Every Child Deserves a Family Act. We know we must work to end discrimination in foster care, and we pledge our loyalty and support to help and ally to pass the Equality Act now. Thank you again so much for letting me speak with you tonight.
It's such an honor and a privilege to be joining you this evening. I'm Rabbi Schicker. The ruling by SCOTUS this morning was a narrow ruling, but one that still concerns many in the Jewish community. I became active in lobbying on legislation relating to foster care and adoption because a family in my congregation shared their personal adoption story. They approached multiple adoption agencies in Michigan and were told they did not meet the qualifications of the agencies because of their Jewish faith. I can only imagine the additional obstacles they would have faced if they were a same-sex couple. I have colleagues and friends across the country who have struggled to become foster parents or adopt because of their faith, their sexual orientation, their marital status. Discrimination should be illegal at all levels of our government. The health and well-being of children should be our highest priority. I turn to Genesis 1:27, where we read, V'yivra Elohim et ha'adam b'tzalmo, b'tzelem Elohim bara oto, zachar unkeva bara otam. God created the human beings in the divine image, creating them in the image of God, creating them male and female. All people are made in the image of God, and all deserve a safe and loving home, whether they are children or adults, however they believe, or whatever their identity. The overwhelming majority of people across this country of all faiths and none at all support LGBTQ equality and want a foster system that does what's best for kids, which means not allowing religious discrimination. As a Reformed Jew, I am proud of the history of my denomination when it comes to these issues, and will continue to fight for the rights of all, but most especially our most vulnerable. I hope many of you will join me in lobbying for the passage of both the Equality Act as well as the John Lewis Every Child Deserves a Family Act, as both are needed and necessary. And our prayers are with all those in Philadelphia this evening. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I am delighted to be here as a Christian minister living in a Black queer body in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Proud to be a board member of Philadelphia Family Pride. I want to begin my reflection on this with a little story. It was mid-September. I had just ended class where I teach undergraduate theology. And one of my students came up to me as I was packing my bag to leave. And the student asked me, "So, what religion are you?" My student asked this question with equal parts confusion and a little shade. And I chuckled. I had shared some about my faith background on the first day of school, that I was formed in a Black Baptist congregation, that I attended K-8 education at a Christian school, and that I had had graduate level training in a Christian seminary. But I had taken for granted the extent to which my theological worldview, my faith, would be legible to my students, particularly because I am a Black queer woman. So I said to my student, I am a Christian minister. And that began a semester-long conversation about theological variety within and between religious traditions. And by the end of the semester, my student was even more resolute in their beliefs, but my student was no longer appalled by the way I am faithful, no longer appalled by the fact that my Christianity isn't exactly like theirs. These are the types of environments that I hope to create when I'm teaching and when I'm preaching, spaces where radical hospitality and respect are present, even when theological agreement is not. So tonight I'm thinking about LGBTQ plus children and teens who are in foster care who long to be part of a family. Thinking about LGBTQ plus people who long to make family. And I do feel a measure of relief that the court today didn't create a broad license to discriminate via this decision. And I will admit that the fact that we're continuing this national discourse about whether or not faith is a lawful and acceptable way to dash the hopes of those foster kids, of those LGBTQ adults who long to make family, breaks my heart still. We have seen an effort to use religious freedom as a cover for discrimination, as a way to restrict the rights of others. The notion of freedom has been used to justify undermining the right that we LGBTQ plus folks have to experience joy and pleasure and protection and, yes, family. But here's what I know. It's possible to be faithful to God and be faithful to our commitment to care and serve each other. And so many faithful Americans actually agree. The majority of people of faith in this country agree. We agree that faith is not a mechanism through which we can find detours and exemptions from the task we have to care for each other and serve each other. We agree that the goal of spirituality is not sifting out, but instead welcoming in. So I'm committed to continuing to fight for a kind of freedom that releases us from the bondage of all kinds of dogma, a freedom that brings with it the limitless possibility of love and justice. I'm committed to fighting to make sure that the Equality Act becomes law and that the Every Child Deserves a Family Act becomes law. I'm committed to reminding queer folk everywhere that we are indeed beloved by a transcendent reality, a transcendent being bigger than ourselves. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. And so I stand with others who have joined in this commitment, and I'm so happy to have had the opportunity to be here tonight. Thanks.
Wow, that was moving to hear from the faith leaders. And it's so important to hear from voices of faith. Like Naomi, I was raised in a Baptist family, and growing up, that religion is oftentimes used as a form of discrimination. So thank you, leaders of faith. I'm encouraged and I'm proud to hear from you. And I'll just say what you just all solidified for me is what I've come to know, is that we are one, and we are here to be of service to each other, plain and simple. So let me get back to the schedule here. I have the pleasure now of introducing a beautiful performance by the San Francisco Men's Gay Choir.
You with the sad eyes, don't be discouraged, oh, I realize it's hard to take courage in a world full of people. You can lose sight of it all, the darkness inside you makes you feel so small.
You can be amazing, you can turn a phrase into a weapon or a drug. You could be the outcast or be the backlash of somebody's lack of love. But I wonder what could happen. I see your true colors shining through. I see your true colors, and that's why I love you. So don't be afraid to let them show.
Woo! What a gift being a co-host this evening and sharing and being in community with all of you has been. And wow, that as a person who loves to sing in the shower and is known to break out into song often, it just is a reminder of so much of the power of spoken word, like we heard earlier, and lifting our voices. It's just so beautiful to witness and be a part of. Now I have the honor of welcoming our next panel to talk about church and state. Rachel Lazar is the president and CEO of Americans United for Separation of Church and State. as well as Nick Fish, who is the president of American Atheists. As an atheist and LGBTQ American, and as an adoptee, Nick knows firsthand how important and the impact of today's decision. So thank you and welcome to Nick and Rachel.
That was so beautiful, and I feel so honored to follow it. My name is Rachel Lazar, and I'm the CEO of Americans United for Separation of Church and State. Today's Supreme Court's decision, while narrow, failed to honor what the majority of Americans believe. Our laws should not allow anyone to use their religious beliefs to harm others. Religious freedom is meant to be a shield that protects the rights of everyone. It's not supposed to be used in ways that harm freedom and equality, and certainly not kids in foster care and prospective parents with big hearts. And let's be crystal clear, our opposition, religious extremists, won't stop at today's decision. They won't stop, even though this is their second failure in recent years to get a free pass from the Supreme Court to use their beliefs to discriminate, because they imagine a world without church-state separation, where our laws give them a special right to get exemptions from decades of civil rights laws so they can discriminate against anyone who doesn't pass their religious litmus test. LGBTQ families in Philly, people like American United's client, Amy Madonna, who was turned away from helping kids at a taxpayer-funded foster care agency in South Carolina because she's Catholic and not evangelical Protestant, and Jews like me who are similarly turned away. Never forget, as Amy Madonna has said, if you don't protect the rights of everybody, it sets a precedent that will eventually touch on you. Our fundamental right to be treated equally under the law depends in part on a foundational American principle, and that principle is separation of church and state. Religious extremists and their allies on the bench and in the legislatures have big plans to force all of us to live by their beliefs. But our laws must not allow anyone to use their religious beliefs to harm others. That's why Americans United will continue to fight in state legislatures, in Congress, in the courts, and alongside all of you for freedom without favor and equality without exception.
Thank you so much. I'm really honored to be here. My name is Nick Fish, and I'm the president of American Atheists. I know that so many of us today are breathing a sigh of relief that our worst fears about this case weren't realized, that our civil rights laws live another day, that the Supreme Court didn't create a license to discriminate in the name of religion. But I want to be crystal clear. This fight is not over. Time and time again, the Supreme Court keeps finding ways to allow discrimination to continue. And I'm worried about what comes next. I'm worried not just for the family that I'd like to have in the future, but also for all the families that look just like mine did when I was adopted by my parents 35 years ago. When they were going through that process, the questions they were asked were not, what church do you go to or which faith do you practice? The questions that they were asked were much more important. Will you love him unconditionally, and will you do what's best for him? And any parent or prospective parent, whether they're biological or adoptive, gay or straight, Catholic or Jewish or Sikh or Muslim, atheist or religious, knows the answer to those questions. And they know that the answers to those questions are the only ones that matter. Everything else, every attempt to keep families like mine from even existing in the first place, is a failure of our society to take care of one another. It's failing the 400,000 kids waiting in our nation's foster care system to find their forever homes. It's failing potential parents who are waiting, just like my parents did, to have their lives turned upside down in the best way possible by a phone call telling them that they're getting to be moms and dads. We have an opportunity to fix our laws by passing the Equality Act, the John Lewis Every Child Deserves a Family Act, and laws all across the country in each state, and we're going to keep fighting for that to ensure that every kid gets the chance to have what I have, loving parents who put all of us first.
So much, Nick and Rachel, and just what I got out of that, equality without exception, and the only thing that matters is that these children have a safe and loving home. It's the only thing that matters. So I have the pleasure of now introducing our LGBTQ plus movement leadership. And so first we have Amani Rupert Gordon. Amani is the executive director of the National Center for Lesbian Rights, a national legal organization advancing LGBTQ rights. And then we have Aaron Tax. Aaron is originally from Philadelphia, and he's the director of advocacy at SAGE, which works to improve the lives of LGBT older people. Next, Stacy Lewis. Stacy is the deputy executive director of programs at the Ali Forney Center, which works on LGBTQ homelessness. Next, Kara Desert. Kara is the Chief Executive Officer of the San Diego LGBT Community Center. And next we have Alfonso David. Alfonso David is the President of the Human Rights Campaign. Now we'll turn it over to Amani.
Good evening. My name is Imani Rupert Gordon. I'm the Executive Director for the National Center for Lesbian Rights, and I'm grateful to be here this evening. First, we want to send our love and support to our community that's in Philly right now. I know this was a hard decision all over, but especially in Philly. We will work in solidarity with you to support all of us. And so, although this wasn't the decision that we wanted because of the very real implications for LGBTQ people, we want to acknowledge that it's important that the court didn't deliver any additional ways that would cause LGBTQ people to be discriminated against, and that's important. The government can and should have non-discrimination protections, and they need to be able to enforce these consistently and in a way that's fair. It's also important to note that another part of what we're talking about when we're talking about the child welfare system is the harm that disproportionately affects Black and Indigenous families. Black lesbian mothers are 4 times more likely to have their children removed from them, and it's much more difficult to reunite these families. So when we're talking about the discrimination of LGBTQ people within the context of a child welfare system, we're not only talking about the type of discrimination that happens in the case like this, but also the discrimination that happens in families, particularly Black and Indigenous mothers face. This is why we absolutely need anti-discrimination protections in place for LGBTQ people and for everyone in this country. We need the Equality Act, and we need the John Lewis Every Child Deserves a Family Act. We're all better when we're all better. So while we're happy this decision didn't go further, we're still recognizing that we have a lot to do in order to protect LGBTQ people. Thanks so much. Thanks, Stacy.
Good evening. I am Aaron Tax, the Director of Advocacy at SAGE, the nation's largest and oldest organization dedicated to improving the lives of LGBT older people. And I'm proud to be here today on behalf of SAGE. Today, the Supreme Court did not create a license to discriminate based on religious beliefs. Instead, it upheld the right of governments across the country to enforce uniform and consistent anti-discrimination laws. LGBT older people know more than anyone the need for these laws. This is the generation that has fought discrimination their entire lives. They have lost jobs and housing, been denied access to credit, access to public spaces, access to taxpayer-funded services, and even been denied health care. But they are also survivors. They are resilient, and they are joining people all across the nation, LGBT people and our allies, to continue the fight for equal rights by supporting the Equality Act. If we are left with one lesson today, it's that this decision underscores the need for the Senate to join the House in passing the Equality Act. LGBT older people have waited long enough. Let's make sure that this is the year we move the Equality Act over the finish line.
Good evening. My name is Stacy Lewis, and my pronouns are she and they, and I'm the Deputy Executive Director of Programs at the Ali Forney Center in New York City, the nation's largest LGBT housing program serving youth. It is an honor to be amongst this community after such a bittersweet ruling. While we know today's decision is a narrow loss and does not create broad, sweeping changes to non-discrimination policies, we still have to call attention to the need for nationwide protections for LGBT people and other marginalized groups, hence the importance of passing the John Lewis Every Child Deserves a Family Act, as so many of my peers have stated before me. It's also important to call attention to the homophobic and transphobic systems that disenfranchise LGBT foster parents and youth. Ali Fournay, our namesake, was a foster care youth in New York City and failed by those same systems. As a homeless service provider, we know firsthand one of the driving factors in LGBT youth fleeing their homes and ending up on the streets is due to family and religious rejection. At the Ali Fournay Center, we stand with our Philadelphia LGBT community as this decision impacts them directly and sends a message to those LGBT foster care youth that their safety is in jeopardy. It cannot go unnoticed that this decision comes during Pride Month, but it serves as a necessary reminder for us that the fight continues and we will hold to that mission. Thank you.
I'm Kara Desert. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I'm proud to be the CEO of the San Diego LGBT Community Center. We know that every child deserves a safe and loving home, especially foster children who have already experienced hardship and, for some, neglect and abuse. These youth are in desperate need of a loving family. At the center, we have clients who are LGBTQ youth who have been placed in foster care only to be rejected by the family when they learn the youth is LGBTQ. It is heartbreaking to imagine a youth having to leave their foster placement, sometimes in the middle of the night, because of who they are or who they love. And yet we know this happens and continues to happen in communities all across our nation. LGBTQ families know the struggle and pain of being an LGBT youth and are uniquely qualified to be the loving parents these youth so desperately need. Same-sex couples are 6 times more likely to adopt foster children. And because of that, we must open the doors wider for more loving homes for all youth who don't have them. To fight for this better world, we joined Lambda's amicus brief along with 26 other LGBTQ youth-serving partners across the nation. We are relieved that today's decision did not recognize a license to discriminate or a general right for religious organizations to violate non-discrimination laws. As we all know, our opponents of LGBT equality have been seeking to undo hard-won non-discrimination protections, and for the second time in 4 years, the court has declined to do so. This is great news for all people protected from non-discrimination laws. But the hard news is that this nuanced decision doesn't tell our incredible LGBTQ community that we are seen, valued, and welcomed, that we deserve to be parents just like all other loving families, and that we deserve the same rights as all other Americans. Every year, it feels like our rights are up for debate at the Supreme Court. And even as LGBTQ Americans continue to face discrimination and health disparities. Today's ruling comes during Pride Month, a month when we celebrate our beautiful, diverse LGBTQ community, when we celebrate the Stonewall riots as the beginning of this fight for our equality and our humanity and our dignity, when we stood up to say no more to oppression, discrimination, and violence. And so today we pledge to continue this fight until all people, including our transgender and non-binary people, our immigrants, our BIPOC communities, and all our families have equal rights and equal justice. We're committed to serving and advocating for the full diversity of our community, including the amazing families who have fought for decades to exist and to be protected like all other loving families. To that end, we call on Congress to pass the Equality Act and to pass the John Lewis Every Child Deserves a Family Act so that no one, adult or youth, faces discrimination for being who they are. Thank you.
think we need Alfonso he's on mute. So if you could hit your mute button, Alfonso, and start again. There you go. Excellent.
It had to happen at least once tonight. Hello, everyone. My name is Alfonso David, and I'm the president of the Human Rights Campaign, which is the largest LGBTQ civil rights organization in the country. You've heard from all of my colleagues tonight, others in the movement, our allies, about the decision in Fulton versus the city of Philadelphia and what it means, that it in no way refutes the constitutionality or the importance of non-discrimination protections. And I think it's worth making sure we all remind ourselves that we will be told over the next few days, over the next few months, that the decision means something else, that the decision means that religious institutions can in fact discriminate. We have to remember that it does not. It's quite clear when you look at the concurring opinion from Justice Alito. But what I think this decision does, when I'm being asked, what does it mean? This decision means that we have to recommit ourselves to our fight for equality. This decision means that we need to talk to our friends and our colleagues about why equality matters. This decision means that we're on the journey from equality to equity to liberation. Yes, our opponents will constantly try to attack us. They've been trying for decades. But guess what? We have won each and every time. When they try to provide or preclude LGBTQ public teachers from serving as public teachers, we won. When they tried to criminalize our lives, we won. When they tried to redefine the definition of marriage and exclude us from the institution of marriage, we won. When they tried to effectively deny transgender people from using restrooms consistent with their gender identity in 2016, we won. And now there is a battle in states all across the country to strip away protections that we have, and they will keep on coming. And what this decision means is that we have to recommit ourselves to advocacy. We have to recommit ourselves to the fight for equality. We have to recommit ourselves to the quest for liberation. That's what this means. As we celebrate Pride Month, we have to remember that the road to liberation is long, but liberation is only possible if we stay in the fight. We have to pass the Equality Act. We have to make sure we lock arms and all of us push forward towards the promised land. Thank you for having me.
Thank you to everyone. And before we wrap up, we want to make sure that you leave here not just hopefully with a sense of hope from what this ruling actually said, but also with something to do. And we heard from a lot of folks tonight that we need to make sure that we pass the Equality Act. And so right now, I'm going to share on your screen take a moment at the end of this event and call your senators now and tell them to pass the Equality Act. Take out your phone, turn on the camera, scan that QR code. It'll open up a page to click to dial, or you can dial that number directly, 888-439-0303. Follow the prompts to put in your zip code, and it'll transfer you to your senator. You can call back and leave the exact same message, just choosing your second senator. Make sure you leave your name and address so they know they live in the state and you want them to support the Equality Act, and tell them something personal about why this matters to you. All of this will be in the message that you hear when you dial as well, so don't worry about remembering all of it. But call that number, call it once a day, call and tell your senator to support the Equality Act. If they already do, call your senator and say thank you for supporting the Equality Act. A thank you is also important. And now I'll pass it back over to Chris and Stacy to wrap up.
Wow, I have someone who's joined me. My daughter, Olivia, who I spoke of earlier. I just want to close, it's something that Alfonso said, right? Like, liberation requires us to stay in the fight. And I feel like we all have a call to action tonight, right? That our work continues, right? Like we can celebrate that, yes, this was a narrow law. This decision was narrow, but folks in Philadelphia are still impacted. And that requires us to stay in the fight, to ensure that we pass the Equality Act, to ensure that we pass the John Lewis Every Child Deserves a Family Act. And something that Reverend Naomi said, you know, really like is sticking on my heart is, you know, freedom. I want a freedom that brings limitless possibility of love and justice, right? And I also want us all, and I think we all deserve radical love that is unquestioning of our dignity and our worth, that makes us feel safe, that makes us feel affirmed. And that is our call to action, to build that world for all of us. So thank you so much for, you know, inviting me to co-host. Thank you to all our speakers, and I'm so, you know, honored to have gotten to share this space with you, Stacy.
Oh, I am too, Chris, and hello to your daughter. She's adorable. Thank you. You know, I'm inspired. I'm excited about our future. This rally has got me jazzed up. And just a few themes that I heard throughout the night is that I want everyone to remember is we see you, you are loved, we're valued, we will continue to fight. And as Alfonso said, we need to recommit ourselves. And so just remind everybody, there's still so much work to do to end discrimination, and we must call on Congress, as my colleagues have said, to pass the John Lewis Every Child Deserves a Family Act and to pass the Equality Act so we can end discrimination against LGBTQ plus people and families. So thank you everyone for joining, and I hope that you were all just as inspired and motivated as we all are, and we will continue to fight. Thank you so much.